Captain Elias Ward had lived through too many wars. He had seen the stars burn, planets fall, and friends vanish in flashes of light. He had once fought for the survival of humanity, and he had won. But victory had left a hole in him that nothing could fill. The wars were over, yet the silence that followed felt heavier than the battles ever had. He was tired. Not of life, but of the endless noise of people pretending the galaxy had healed. The medals, the speeches, the gratitude, they all felt empty to him. So one quiet evening, he took his old freighter, the Resolute, and left. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He only carried a few supplies, an old photograph, and the wish to disappear. His destination was Virella 9, a planet once rich and full of life. Long ago, humans had built cities there, but when the atmosphere began to collapse, it was abandoned. Now it was just another dead world, silent, broken, forgotten. To Elias, it sounded perfect. As the Resolute entered orbit, the view below was gray and lifeless. The surface was covered in ash, and the remains of cities lay like skeletons under a pale sky. He landed the ship near an old research dome, half buried in dust. When the engines fell silent, he sat for a long time in the cockpit, listening to nothing but the sound of his own breath. "This is it," he said quietly to himself. "A place where even memory fades." He stepped outside. The wind was thin and dry, brushing against his worn uniform. The ground crunched under his boots as he walked through the ruins. Here and there, old machines lay rusting, their screens long dark. He found an old laboratory and set up camp inside, sealing the doors against the cold air. For days, Elias lived in silence. He fixed small things in the dome, cooked simple meals, and stared out at the dying horizon. Sometimes he would talk to himself or to the empty room. Other times he would take out the photograph, a picture of him and Dr. Lena Hart, smiling under the sun of another world long ago. Lena had been more than a friend. She had been the mind behind humanity's greatest medical advances, and the heart that kept their crew human during the dark years of the war. She had died during the siege of Thalon, or so he believed. He had never found her body, only wreckage and silence. Since that day, he had carried guilt like a shadow. On the 10th night, while Elias was running a system check on his equipment, the monitor began to flicker. The scanner had picked up a faint signal underground, a human biosignature. He frowned. That can't be right. He ran the scan again. Same result. A weak but steady human life sign, deep below the surface, several kilometers east of his location. For a long moment, he just stared at the screen. It had to be an error. Nothing could live on this planet. Its air was toxic, its water frozen, its systems long dead. But the scanner was one of his most reliable tools. It didn't make mistakes, he almost ignored it. After all, he had come here to be alone. But something inside him, a small voice he thought he'd buried, whispered, "What if it's real?" Against his better judgment, Elias prepared his rover and followed the coordinates. The landscape grew stranger as he drove, a desert of shattered metal and melted stone. It was like walking through the bones of a giant. Eventually, he found what looked like the remains of an underground entrance, a collapsed hatch covered in rubble. He dug for hours, his old muscles burning, his breath fogging inside his helmet. Finally, he uncovered a passage leading downward. Faint lights still flickered along the walls, old emergency lamps powered by something deep below. "Someone built this to last," he muttered, gripping his rifle as he descended. The tunnel opened into a wide chamber filled with dust-covered terminals and broken stasis pods. Most were empty, their glass shattered. But one pod at the far end still glowed faintly blue. Elias approached carefully. The nameplate was cracked, but he could still read it. Dr. Lena Hart, Project Continuum. His heart stopped. For a moment, the world fell away. He pressed a shaking hand against the glass. Inside, frozen in pale light, was Lena, her face calm, her chest rising and falling in the slow rhythm of deep stasis. He stepped back, nearly tripping over debris. His mind refused to believe it. She had died. He had seen the reports, the wreckage. Yet here she was, untouched by time. "No," he whispered. "This can't be." But the scanner on his wrist confirmed it. The faint heartbeat matched perfectly. Elias sank to his knees beside the pod. Decades of loneliness crashed over him at once. The silence of the dead world suddenly felt unbearable. He touched the glass again, gently this time. "You're alive," he said softly. "You're really alive." He spent the next few hours studying the chamber. There were old data terminals around, most broken, but a few still functional. The logs he managed to recover told fragments of a story. Firella 9 had once hosted Project Continuum, a secret experiment meant to preserve human consciousness during planetary collapse. Lena had volunteered to stay behind as the lead scientist. When the colony evacuated, she had sealed herself inside the facility, hoping to save what was left of humanity's knowledge. The final log entry was hers. If this works, I may sleep for a long time. But if someone finds me, tell them humanity still has hope. Elias sat in silence, staring at the glowing pod. He realized that Lena hadn't died at Thalon. She had come here to this dead world to protect something greater. His mind filled with questions. How had her pod survived this long? Why was the system still running? But those thoughts faded when he looked at her face. For the first time in years, he felt something other than numbness. He didn't know if he could wake her safely. The power levels were low and the systems were fragile. But he knew one thing. He couldn't leave her there. Elias returned to the Resolute and brought back tools, cables, and a portable generator. He worked through the night, patching wires and cleaning filters. Every spark of light felt like a heartbeat. At one point, he caught his reflection in the glass beside her. His face was older, lined and worn, but his eyes were alive again. "You waited for someone to find you," he whispered. "Well, here I am." When he finally restored partial power, the pod's readings grew stronger. The stasis field flickered slightly and a soft hum filled the room. The ancient systems were still fighting to protect her, even after all this time. Elias sat beside the pod, exhaustion pulling at his eyes. But he refused to sleep. He watched the faint glow, feeling as if he were keeping vigil over something sacred. He thought he had come to this world to die in peace, but now, surrounded by the ruins of the past, he realized something else. Life had not finished with him yet. The planet outside remained silent, but within the buried chamber, 2 heartbeats pulsed in defiance of time. And for the first time in decades, Captain Elias Ward whispered a quiet promise to the sleeping woman behind the glass. "I won't leave you again." The chamber was silent except for the low hum of old machinery. Captain Elias Ward sat beside the glowing stasis pod, his hands covered in dust and grease. He had been awake for 2 days now, repairing ancient circuits and recharging the power core using his ship's remaining energy cells. The numbers on the screen flickered, temperature levels rising slowly, oxygen stabilizing, heartbeat stronger than before. She was alive, really alive. Elias looked through the glass at Dr. Lena Hart, still sleeping inside the blue light. Her face was calm, peaceful, like a person lost in a dream. He hadn't seen that face in decades, but it felt as familiar as the stars. He wiped his tired eyes and whispered, "Almost there, Lena. Just a little longer." Hours later, the pod released a faint hiss. A light blinked green. The stasis seals disengaged with a sharp click. Elias stood, his heart racing as the lid slowly opened. A thin mist rolled out. Lena's eyes fluttered open. For a moment she looked confused, staring up at the ceiling as if trying to remember where she was. Then her gaze found Elias. Her lips trembled. "Elias?" He almost forgot how to breathe. "Yeah, it's me." She tried to sit up, but her muscles were weak from the long stasis. He gently helped her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. "She felt cold as ice. I thought you were gone," she said softly, her voice barely more than a whisper. He smiled, though his eyes were wet. "I thought the same about you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was full of memories, of the war, the missions, the friends they lost, the promises left unspoken. Finally, Lena looked around the ruined lab. "What happened here?" Elias explained what he knew, that the colony had fallen, that Firella 9 had become a dead world, and that he had come here just to disappear. When he told her how he found her signal by accident, she laughed softly. "After all this time, you still find me when everything else is gone," she said. As Lena recovered her strength, she began to explore the facility with Elias. Many systems were broken, but some still worked. Old terminals came to life under her hands. She moved carefully, reading fragments of data, her scientific mind coming alive again. From the logs, they learned that Project Continuum was designed to save the minds of dying humans by transferring their memories into stable digital cores. Lena had stayed behind to test the system during the planet's collapse. I wasn't supposed to sleep this long, she said, scrolling through the files. The pod should have awakened me after 10 years. But the system malfunctioned. It kept me in stasis. For centuries, Elias nodded slowly. The war ended decades ago. Humanity survived, but it's spread thin across the stars now. You've been sleeping through history. She stared at the flickering screens. And you? You came here to die. He hesitated. I thought there was nothing left worth living for. Until I found you. Her eyes softened. You always did have terrible timing. He laughed quietly, the sound echoing through the cold metal halls. It was the first real laugh he'd had in years. Over the next few days, they repaired parts of the underground system to transmit data to orbit. Lena was determined to save the research stored within the facility. There's something here that could help humanity, she explained. Project Continuum wasn't just about survival. It was about memory, making sure no one is truly forgotten. Elias helped her reconnect the power conduits and stabilizers. The more they worked, the more the planet around them began to stir. The ancient reactors buried deep below the surface started to hum, unstable after so long without maintenance. Lena, Elias said one evening, watching the warning lights blink red, these systems aren't safe. The planet's core is unstable. If those reactors go critical— I know, she interrupted softly, but we're close. I just need a few more hours. He looked at her, really looked at her. The woman he thought was gone forever was once again risking everything for humanity, and somehow, even after all these years, he couldn't stop her. Then let's make those hours count, he said. The ground began to shake as they worked. Dust fell from the ceiling. The monitors flickered and alarms screamed. Lena typed furiously on the console, transferring the data to the Resolute's uplink. Elias secured power cables and stabilized the generator. Every second felt like it could be the last. Data transfer at 70%, Lena shouted. Almost there! A deep rumble shook the room. Cracks spread through the floor. One of the walls collapsed, sending debris flying. Elias shielded Lena with his arm, pulling her away from falling metal. Forget the rest, he said. We have to go now. Not yet, she argued. If we leave now, everything we worked for will vanish. Lena, she looked at him, eyes fierce despite the chaos. We can't let the past die in silence, Elias, not again. He understood. She wasn't just fighting to save data. She was fighting to save the memory of who humanity was. He nodded. All right, together. They held the line as long as they could. When the transfer finally hit 100%, the system beeped and the lights dimmed. The data, decades of lost science, human records, and memory, was safe aboard the Resolute. Got it. Lena gasped. It's done. The moment she said it, a massive explosion rocked the facility. The old reactors were finally collapsing. Elias grabbed her hand. Time to go. They ran through collapsing corridors, guided only by the flickering lights from Elias's helmet. The air was full of smoke and dust. The planet groaned beneath them like a dying giant. They reached the rover, speeding across the cracked plain toward the ship. Behind them, pillars of light burst from the ground as the underground complex tore itself apart. When they reached the Resolute, Elias wasted no time. The ship's engines roared to life and they lifted off just as the ground below split open, swallowing what remained of the research facility. From orbit, they watched as Varela 9 began to crumble, its crust breaking apart under its own unstable core. Lena stared out the window, her voice soft. All those years, all that work. Gone. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. Not gone. You saved the best part, the knowledge, the memory. Humanity will have that again. She turned to him, smiling faintly. You always did know what to say. He smiled back. I had a lot of time to practice. They sat together in the quiet of space, watching the planet fade into dust. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt different now, not empty but peaceful. Lena finally broke it. So, Captain. What now? Elias thought for a moment. We take this data home. Humanity still needs hope. And maybe we give it to them. Lena nodded. Together, then? He looked at her, eyes warm. Together. She leaned back in her seat, closing her eyes. You know, she said softly, you were supposed to rest here. You came to this world to die. Elias chuckled. I guess the universe had other plans. Outside the window, the stars stretched endlessly. Bright, beautiful, alive. Humanity's legacy, fragile yet unbroken, drifted among them. As the Resolute turned toward the distant light of human colonies, Elias felt something he hadn't felt in decades: peace. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old photograph, now faded and cracked. He placed it gently on the console beside him. Lena looked at it and smiled. "We're still here," she whispered. Elias nodded, his eyes on the stars. "And we always will be." The ship disappeared into the darkness, leaving behind a world that had died, but also a story that would live forever. Because in the endless expanse of the universe, even when everything else fades, humans endure.